Welcome, everyone. Let's begin the meeting with a moment of silence followed by the serenity.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Good evening. My name is Mark, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Mark.
My sobriety date is April 5th, 2003. Welcome to the 7 p.m. Thursday night treasure map meeting of the Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, but spouses are welcome to attend this meeting with the alcoholic. We'd like to send a special welcome to any visitors from out of town. Please stand and introduce yourself. Do we have any visitors? Anybody who may be visiting the Treasure Map meeting for the first time, please stand and be recognized.
Read alcoholic.
Hey, Reed. Joe. Peter. Hey, Polly. Greg. Hey, Don. Welcome, everyone. And finally, we'd like to welcome anyone who is at their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're happy you're here tonight, and you're welcome. Anyone here for their first meeting? All right. If you would like, please come to the welcoming table. We have a gift for you. Once again, thank you for being here with us tonight. The Treasure Map meeting group of Alcoholics Anonymous celebrates our sobriety birthdays on the last Thursday of each month. Treasure Map home group members celebrate each month of sobriety for the first 12 months, then each consecutive year thereafter. If you'd like the Treasure Map group to be your home group, please see Randy in the back for details. The Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous is committed to bringing a message of hope to those who suffer from alcoholism. We believe this message is contained within the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and our personal experiences. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Our meeting tonight will focus on step 1, and the Big Book study meeting will begin shortly. If you need a book, I believe there's some in the back. Now I'd like to welcome John to read how it works. Or Robert. And
I am Robert Alcoholic. Hi, Robert. Oh.
I got a book.
It's in the book. I don't read it that often though, so. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such importance. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And some of these we balked, We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which were suggested as a program of recovery. One, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Three, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Four, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Five, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Six, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Seven, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Eight, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Nine, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us have been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after made clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to welcome Nate to read the 12 traditions as we pass the baskets. Thank you in advance for your generosity and support. Tradition 7 states that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
My name's Nate. I'm an alcoholic. The 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, the loving God as whom may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is the desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Now we're gonna have Mike come up for announcements, and I just have one real quick announcement. Somebody left a book here last week. Randy's got it in the back there, so if that's yours, there it is.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've been asked by the group to just share a couple of thoughts about the meeting. We have a number of new people here tonight. I know last week we did this. We'll probably do this the next couple of weeks, so we just sort of get 3 or 4 through. And then this spot here generally will take a 10 or 15 minute short speaker about the topic. We'll take a break, and then the longer speaker will speak after it. So, but just to sort of announce and talk to folks about what we're trying to do, this particular meeting has really 3 main goals for those who are new and were here last week. The first one is to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to those who suffer. We believe that that message comes out of the big book. We believe that that message is focused on step work, applied to your daily life in the moment, and to continually develop that as a lifestyle. The second goal that we have is really to the newcomer. And I think there's 1 and 2 are kind of synonymous, but a real special effort to reach out to the newcomer. On the back tables there where Randy is, and then to the right of Randy, there is a couple of pads. If you'd like to make this your home group, certainly you can put your name, your phone, your name, and your email address down. That's great. If this is your home group and you would like to take on some service commitments, we'd appreciate that as well. There's a volunteer list over there. Come around the middle of March, we'll start formalizing those things. But the reason I bring this up now is because of this idea of the newcomer. We're going to have a 12-step committee here where we find ways to reach out to new people. We have the St. Francis House right across the street. Like to have a nice contact with them to be able to communicate and make sure the lines of communication are open and make sure that they know that they're welcome here. We also have the Dudley House, which is less than a half mile away, and the Union Gospel Mission as well, which is less than a half mile away. And so contacts there, people volunteering to pick up folks and bring them over here to the meeting, connect with them. Perhaps that might lead into sponsorship, or at least pointing them to a sponsor, or hey, if nothing else, give them a big one, right? So those kinds of relationships are really important. We will also have folks who will be reaching out to the treatment centers in town, making sure we've already done these things, but just to make sure that there's a liaison between our group and those facilities. To make sure that those folks know that we're here, that we're desiring to help them if they so choose to accept that help. The number 1 goal for the newcomer at this particular group is to make sure that they feel welcomed. People come up and smile and shake their hands. Our greeter tonight, Chris, you might keep him in your prayers. Chris went into the hospital today, so he could use some prayers, quick healing, we hope, right? And but we'll always have someone stand at the door smiling, hopefully having their hand out. If you're standing around and you see someone you don't know, please put your hand out to them. Make sure those people feel welcome. We want this to be home. We want this to be a safe place for women, for newcomers, and for each other. Right? And then the third commitment that we have, or goal that we have, is to make sure that we try to bring in people from all over the place, anywhere in North America, that can articulate this message well. That just for whatever reason has been blessed with a gift to be able to do that. And so in the coming weeks, I think you'll check out on our website, thetreasuremap.com, that more and more people from out of state will be coming in to try to share this message of Alcoholics Anonymous with us, and hopefully those newcomers that we reach out to. Someone asked me last week about, they joined up as a home group member. We didn't talk much about birthdays. They're going to be celebrated, I think Mark read it tonight, last Thursday of the month. And we're going to celebrate each particular month, 1 through 11, 1 year, and then each year after that. We think by reaching out and continually sort of encouraging folks on a 30-day basis that maybe they'll come back more often. Maybe they'll find some encouragement in that and some enthusiasm in that. And so we're optimistic about that. Lastly, the thing that I would like to say tonight is there's been a lot of people that have been involved in this so far. Whether it's setting up, sitting with Father Chris, who's been gracious enough to allow us to use the gymnasium here at Our Lady of Guadalupe, or just people planning, talking, having discussion. And I really want to thank them, because this meeting could not have taken place without their efforts and without their thought. We feel like there's a niche in the fellowship in the heartland here that we can help fill. Or maybe a better way to say that is we feel like there's a way to complement what's already going on, a way to magnify the beauty that is Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so we're very, very committed to the new person. We're very, very committed to you if you're here. If for whatever reason you're struggling, and it's not a discussion meeting, as you guys know, but if for whatever reason you're struggling, please reach out to someone. Come up to me. Come up to one of the folks who are up here reading or talking or whatever might be going on. Let us try to help you if we can. All right. So God bless you all. Thank you for being here. We're going to take this would be filled by a speaker, some short little speak, right? And so we're going to take a couple minutes, probably just 5 or 10. And then we're going to have tonight's speaker, and that's Erik M. from Coleman, South Dakota. And we'll introduce him after the break. So before we do that, or while we do it, are there any thoughts or we have a number of people online tonight. I know we kind of joked last week about we claimed 800. It wasn't anywhere near that. But we do have actually several on tonight. So we welcome the folks who are not here tonight physically, but are here with us online. We honor the traditions when we do this. We follow the guidelines of Alcoholics Anonymous as it relates to any kind of internet use, any kind of online meetings. We follow their guidelines very strictly. We're very committed to following the traditions. And we know that our home group and the health of our home group needs to be centered on those traditions, as each of our individual recoveries needs to be centered on the steps. So before we break, or while we break, if there's any questions, we'll certainly be happy to answer them for anybody. Bathrooms are right off to the side. Coffee in a little basket I know Shane likes to swill coffee and not throw a buck in there, but by the gallon. Anyway, a little bucket over there. So anything we can do to help you, we want to do that. Why don't we just take a very, very short 5 or 10 minute break, and then Erik will come up and tell us his story. Thank you very much.
I'll get out of your way here. I don't mean to step into the. I'm gonna have some fun tonight.
Stand right here if you want, or I'll sit down, whatever you want to do.
Oh, yeah, can I have my coffee up here?
Sure, absolutely.
How many online do we have?
I'll look here in a second. Okay, gang, we're gonna get started. I ask you to take a seat. So a couple thoughts. The first one is that some people ask where the idea for the title of the meeting came from. Treasure map. What is that? It's a treasure map meeting. Well, one of our heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous was a gentleman who passed away a couple years ago. His name was Sandy B. And Sandy had many great lines, too many to count, really. But one of the best things that he ever said to me was that the big book is not the treasure. It's the treasure map. God is the treasure. You follow the treasure map to find the treasure. You know, and that leads right into this idea of the 12-step. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's a perfect segue to the person that I'm about to introduce tonight. Back when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in Chicago, several months later I got transferred to Sioux Falls, and there was a group of people who seemed to be younger than the average person that I saw. And they seemed to have something going on that was kind of special. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't really understand it. I've come to believe that what that is that I saw was a living fellowship with God amongst his people. And that was extraordinarily attractive to me, although I couldn't put a name on it. And gentlemen, with Erik and took me kind of under their wing in many ways. And taught me many things, and I'm very grateful for that. Erik and I go way back from the very first days, as I said, that I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. And over the last several years, watching him grow, watching him continue to mature, watching him continue to develop, watching him continue to grow spiritually, and watching God work in his life has been a great gift to me. He's one of the finest men I know, and I am very humbled to introduce my friend Erik M. from Coleman, South Dakota. God bless you, Erik.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everybody. I am Erik, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Erik. I got to be careful with the last name. Yeah, the last name, because we're being broadcast. And at the level of press, radio, and the 3 people online, I need to maintain my anonymity. Or 300. I don't know how many are on. Honored to be here tonight. I'm not from Coleman, though. I have to correct Mike. You know, to the big city folks, these small towns all are the same. They're not. Because Colton is where I'm from. That town is full of mostly sane individuals. Coleman, on the other hand, they in this program, they need to be. So I'm from Colton, again, sobered up here in Sioux Falls. I know that why I am excited about this meeting and where I think the vision is and get excited is because when I was introduced to AA back in 1986, we cut our teeth on 12-step giants. Most of those guys have passed on. I know some of them are still around. You weren't near as old back in those days either, Don. But I think of the main guys that really kind of the foundational guys for Sioux Falls, the guys south down in Yankton, that changed my life, that threw us into cars on a Friday, and I'd say, where are we going? It's none of my business. And we would go to the Human Service Center, or we'd go to jail. I remember I see Reed here. First meeting I saw him is when, I think the state had you for a while. That's why I love where I hope heading with this is really to reach the new person. Because I do believe that when I get to the end meeting, in the end gate, I do believe there's just a sense in me, I'm going to look back at my life through God's eyes. And I'm going to be able to see all the times in the past 31 years or whatever it is until I get there and get home to the big meeting, is that I'm going to see that there's probably several times that I was at risk and didn't know it, for getting pulled back into this thing, this disease called alcoholism. Probably not even aware of it, because I really do believe God's in the, not in the shadows, but He's not always the burning bush, just the small things that are powerful, that change the course of our lives. And I'm going to look back and I'm going to see probably that this 12th step, the ability of doing what I'm trying to do here tonight, of reaching our hand out, working with other people, is probably the number one thing that's allowed me to stay here, that's given me the life that I currently enjoy. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you for the opportunity. I know he talked about having heavy hitters. I hear that term. We're starting out with low, with me, kind of low, and we'll head up from there. Though I know in a couple of weeks, I know the individual, gentleman named Mark, is going to be talking on step 2. I've heard that story for 30 some years. I mean, odd nauseam. So the good thing tonight, if you remember anything, just try to insulate yourself for 2 weeks from now, because that guy's just full of crap. And no, I'm just kidding. He does probably one of the best step 2 foundational things I've ever heard in my life. So my story, what we were like, what I was like, what happened, what it's like now, what I'm like now, as it relates to the first step. I think last week, for those that were here, we outlined in the book, and Mike did a good job of how the big book really defines what this thing is, this problem, what this disease of alcoholism is. And it really has 3 components. That there is we're sick, it says, in 3 areas. We read it tonight in how it works. That it says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Is that I find out that I'm different bodily than normal drinkers. I find out that, as it says, most of us have been full flight from reality, mental. That would be me. But the spiritual also, which was probably the hardest thing for me to grasp and get my hands around, is how does that relate to this illness that's taken me out? I'm going to try tonight to share a little bit of my story. What AA does is different than anything else. This textbook, it's even written differently. Got a different focus. Most books, if it's written about a disease, it would be written to the caregivers. So here's our doctors here. We would write them on, a book on how to recognize whatever that disease is, the symptoms in you. Then they go about looking for those symptoms and then would diagnose me. I don't know if any of you have ever been diagnosed. Being a product of several systems, I carry many diagnoses. It's a matter of public record. Some of them weren't even very attractive, complimentary at all. I've been called a lot of things. But this book is written so that people pour their experience out. First 100 drunks got together when they compiled this book, and to me, I know it has to be spiritually inspired book. Has to be. Imagine getting 100 folks together with the maximum sobriety of 3, 3.5, 4 years, and try to come up with something that makes sense. At 3.5 years, I was still wearing slip-on shoes, trying to unscramble this thing, but they threw their experience down, and what they ask us to do is to lay ours over the top. We share stories here, our stories. I think the thing that impressed me the most, my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was an old guy named Monk. Now, Monk, he was a biker fella. He was built, he had no neck. He was kind of like Reed before he got off the steroids. He was built like this, and he had a tracheotomy or whatever, and he'd talk out of here, and he had tattoos. He had a head about the size, I don't know, one of them jungle gorillas. And he was the meanest man I've ever seen in my life. And I remember in a fog, it's all kind of black and white. There's no color in that in my life at that point. Everything's kind of this gray, kind of like these London movies. Foggy, kind of rainy, no sun. And I'm hearing this guy, and it's kind of like Charlie Brown's parents. And, in the background, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, that's how everything sounded to me. And all of a sudden it sped up, and I heard for the first time in my life the message of recovery from somebody that was applying it to their life. And I'll never forget this huge man with tattoos in tears talking about when he finally came to the realization of the spiritual component in his life, in his being, how he was created and how God was the most important thing in his life. And it just blew my mind. I grabbed him after that meeting, and I don't know how many cigarettes we smoked as I sat there. Do not know what we talked about, but I do know that I walked away from there for the first time in my life thinking that there's a way out of this. For the first time in my life, there's a way out of this. Because I don't know about the rest of you. I sobered up young. I'm not that way anymore. That's the good and the bad news. It goes fast. But I remember coming in, I knew for many years I was in a hopeless state of mind and body. I knew that. I couldn't change. I didn't want to live like I was living. I didn't want to be the animal. I didn't want to hurt the people that I loved the most. I didn't want to continue to fail on things that were important to me. I didn't want to continue to carve away to where my existence came down to about the size of this ball or this sphere. And you live in there, in that sheer disconnectedness, all the fear that goes with that, and just this sense of loneliness that cuts you to some place deep that you can't even reach. And I had been living in that for a long time, but I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out the riddle. I'd never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you would have said, if you heard of AA, I would think you were talking to a towing company. Seriously. AAA, AA, maybe just dropped an A. A. My relationship with alcohol, again, I sobered up at 27 years old. It couldn't have been that long, but it really was long enough for me. Because when I started was very young. I grew up in a home where alcohol was very prevalent. It was a normal part of life. I knew very young, I was the youngest of 5 children, that I didn't always like the effects that alcohol had on people who consumed it. It was an unpredictable process. Sometimes it would be like Christmas and Santa Claus would appear. Other times it was like Freddy flippin' Krueger showing up with violence and people that supposedly love each other taking this out on each other. And I knew right away that alcohol was a part of that component. I don't remember when, but I made a conscious decision early on that I was not going to get involved with that aspect. I didn't like what it did to people. Where that changed was through my first experience with alcohol and what it did for me. I don't know about the rest of you. I've always been, even as a small child, what I can remember, hypersensitive, think a lot, looking for something more than what's here. I've always had this yearning and feeling like I needed a purpose. I needed something more, even as a child. And that avenue to me was sports. I had 2 older brothers that were all American athletes. And I remember going up to SDSU to that field with the cowbells. And even then I recognized the ladies that went with it, but and the women, and on that green grass. And I watched my brother, who was an All-American quarterback, perform. And I just knew it was going to be sports, but I'm wired such as that becomes my singular focus. And I remember early on, I was going to, athletics was going to be my deal. And I would be out on a night like tonight, across the street, shooting baskets until dark, or the best I could get a light bulb. And I would do that night after night with a frozen basketball to try to up my hoop game. And I remember spending a lot of time alone as a kid in this kind of a sense of dream world. But I always felt awkward around other people. I always felt awkward in big crowds. And my father was a big business guy, and we would entertain, and alcohol, of course, was the social lubricant. And I remember as a kid, I would then, as I got older, I was a server. And I remember I would serve drinks, and I would go over and give Don his drink and whatever. And I remember at one point, I don't know what even happened. I was maybe thirsty, whatever. There was enough left in this tumbler, don't even know what it was. And I did this, and I tossed it. I may be 7, 8 years old. I remember all my ideas about alcohol at that moment changed for some reason. I don't know what it is. I don't remember feeling an instant thing. I didn't like the taste. I didn't like the way it burned, but I did like what it did to me in a few minutes. Is I was far less awkward when I was going around. In fact, the experiment went so well, I remember going and tossing another one. And I became the life of the party that night. I do remember. I don't remember if I got sick, but I do remember I had a different idea about my relationship with alcohol, and I liked what it did to me. It took all these uneasiness feelings and made them dissipate. Honestly, from about 10 years old and on, it became, other than sports, probably the sole focus of my life, alcohol. Even as 10, 11 years old. Now, why that is, of course, you can't do it. I mean, it's not like I was old enough where you could buy liquor a lot of places in Sioux Falls back in those days, but not at 10. We couldn't pull it off with a fake ID. That was about 16 before we were doing that, but we would steal. We had liquor in houses, the friends we ran, and we would steal things, and we would live for that weekend deal, and then we would have a sleepover or whatever we would have to do. The lying began relatively early, and that we would drink. And I remember the first time where I had no limits, and I stole a bottle out of my dad's extensive liquor cabinet. And I know I had no experience because I could have stole a lot of things. I stole a bottle of really rock gut gin. Again, obviously I didn't know my flavors. And I remember drinking it that night. And the first thing about what Silkworth says about having an allergy, that we process alcohol differently. I knew from very early on, when I look back on this whole concept of what Silkworth was presenting in this big book, is that I have that deal. Because it just seems like once I start drinking, I can drink. I drank far more than any of my friends at that point. I polished off that. It's not a fifth anymore or a liter. Back then it was a quart. And I remember blacking out. I had my first blackout. Reason I knew that is I woke up, I had had my first date at 10. I woke up with a stuffed zebra. We had broke into somebody's house, or we were partying at some girl's house, and he was a big game hunter, and he had all these mounts in the basement, and I was curled up underneath a zebra. I remember kind of waking up, and I don't believe I did anything that was fifth step material. I was only 10, so quit. Again, typical. Through junior high, again, we just would, every opportunity we could, started to get into troubles, the things that we all kind of tend to get into when we're raising all kinds of hell. We started having school problems, a lot of things, started getting into more fights at home, started getting caught. I remember first big high school sophomore, for whatever reason stands to mind, is that I drank a half gallon of Windsor that night as a 10th grader. That's not normal. I remember bits and pieces, and my blackouts a lot of times came in the form of slideshows. It's like, oh, there's Mike. Oh, there's Don. Oh, it's Tuesday. Oh, it's Thursday. You know, that's what I did. And I would try to connect the dots. And I don't know about any of you, but I was a blackout drinker. I never came out of a blackout thinking that I'd gotten a job promotion or that I'd helped the Sisters of the Poor with a food drive, you know, won some award. It was always something tragic. I don't know about the rest of you. And a lot of times the horror of these for me were the things that honestly I just didn't know what to fill in the blanks with this time. The big book talks about that some of us become, you know, dangerously antisocial when under the influence of alcohol. And I'm not proud that that's many times what happened to me in a blackout. I hurt people. I would come out of it, not so much with a firm resolution not to drink, but not to drink like that. You know, the other thing that says that, you know, there's only one thing that we all share in common. I mean, some of you had DUIs, never had one. Could have had hundreds. They didn't give them out in those days. Who's the most sober in the car? You're driving, Robert. That's what the police did. Throw the beer in the trunk, throw the alcohol in. I mean, could have had DUIs. But the one thing it says in here that we all have in common is that we can't start drinking without developing this phenomenon of craving. I remember Jimmy Carr in Yankton, one of the guys that just so instrumental in my early sobriety, used to say, Eric, when I take a drink takes me. And it really makes sense to me, is that I can't predict. It's the only substance known, I know it's abnormal, because normally when I drink, it quenches a thirst, right? It's normal to feel thirsty. I do all the time. I drink enough of this, it quenches it. For example, John's here. We got a 24 pack of Coke, 12-ounce cans. We're going to sit down at the table here and we're going to have us some drinking. Now, I don't know about John, but I don't know how many Coke cans we could get through before just the carbonation and this quenching that goes on for that thirst would go. But I don't know, John, how many cans of Coke could you drink before you'd want to shut her down? You know, 2, 3. But I've heard John's story. I know John's an alcoholic. I know I am. If we put, you know, 2 ounces of good whiskey in each one of them cans, not an issue. We'd run through them Coke so quick, then we wouldn't need Coke anymore. You know, what is it that the action of alcohol on me, in a body sense, whether it's a lack of enzymes or whatever it is, it makes no difference. All I know is when I drink, I get thirsty. And that I can't predict when it's going to end. Another perfect example of that is I remember one time coming off a tremendous bender. And I mean, every fiber in me hurts. It hurts to think. And I'm up to, I don't know, some of you remember Rentschler's truck stop, that we'd hang out with Rentschler's, and I'm up at Rentschler's house. The reason I was up at Rentschler's house is that I knew that Jack always had a big stack of booze there, and it's a Sunday, and in South Dakota, you couldn't get alcohol on those days. And I remember going to the refrigerator, finding, you know, they call it the hair of the dog or whatever it is, because I just know I need something to go. And there's 2 cans of beer, only 2 cans of beer. And I'll never forget, I'm not really a big beer drinker. It was maybe a nice social lubricant, but there was no way I was even going to open one of them, because I knew all that was going to do is scratch an itch for me, and all I'd be doing is spending the rest of the day trying to figure out where I'm getting more. I didn't have one. Things I've heard in AA, you know, what's an alcoholic's favorite drink? This next one. That's me. Early on, you know, my story includes, you know, a lot of narcotic drugs. It is what it is. Looking back, it's very clear to me that all my drug use was for one purpose and one purpose only. It was either to help control the amount I consumed of alcohol, or it was to try to negate some of the negative effects that alcohol had on me. Perfect example is when I found the white powder, and I had a small habit, maybe about, I don't know, an 8 ball to a 1/4 ounce a day of cocaine. You can call that a short habit, but And I remember this little gal, I thought I was hiding this, but we're at the Pomp Room, and which was one of my favorite haunts. And I remember her coming up after me, and she's looking at me, giving me the pre-Al-Anon up and down. And she says to me, she says, "What are you on?" And of course, well, what do you mean, what am I on? And she says, "I've watched tonight, you've had at least 100 drinks. And you're standing here like you're stone cold sober." That's why I loved the powder, because I could drink without blacking out, at least until the last year and a half, when my blackouts would last sometimes more than one day. Marijuana, same thing. That allowed me not to drink as much. When we smoked a bunch of marijuana, I just didn't seem to consume a half gallon of Windsor. I maybe only had a fifth. We had a pizza, played some Pong. There's no doubt when I lay my story over the experience that I suffer from an allergy of the body that most people don't have. My mom didn't have it. I remember her having one drink a year on Christmas, and it was about that big, and she got about halfway through, and I'll never forget. I didn't really notice it until I noticed it in AA, but I do remember and recall it was always pushed away because I'm starting to feel it. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, that's the whole idea here. Or I'm starting to feel out of control. And I'm thinking, if you just keep it going another 2 or 3, you get past that into this euphoria. So there's no doubt I have the physical aspect. The other 2 parts of this first step that I had to swallow took a hell of a lot more education and a hell of a lot more weight in my experience of failure in this program than it was in the success. This idea that we have a mental obsession. This book would be 1 page if all we had to learn is we had this allergy, and this page would say, basically, Robert, don't drink. Because I know once as the big book says, I can't safely ingest alcohol in any form because I risk this allergy kicking off. I got to be hypersensitive, which has caused me to be completely transparent with every doctor I go in and see because they don't know unless we tell them. In one surgery, I failed to do this. I have a hyper tolerance level to when they put you out. What do they call that? Not antihistamine. When they put you out for surgery, yeah. And I am on the table. They think I'm under, and they start to carve on me. And it's like, whoa, dude, I'm awake. Okay, direct result of me torturing my body with different chemicals. I have to be transparent about this. But there's no doubt I have this. But the thinking issue, the idea that when I made a decision, and I was introduced to AA, is the idea that, as Bill said in here, that's it, self-knowledge. I'm an alcoholic. Who would ever go back and do something like that once you're freed of it? Me. I remember I would go to meetings because, again, I was unemployable in the beginning of AA. I really was. I was basically self-employed in the pharmaceutical industry. We did everything from market distribution to collections. Reed was part, he knows about that. He would have been a good collector. And so I really didn't know how to work. I remember my first, again, I'm all right. I don't need your help. I've got this now. My first job was delivering towels. Towels. I got honest with this guy because I had a sponsor that told me to do that. Told him, I'm newly recovered. I've got almost 8 years of college in, but only 9 credits passed. That was back before they required you to pass things to continue to get Pell Grants. And Pell Grants were good for at least a month partying. I went to him and told him what I was doing. And my job was, basically consisted of this, is that I drove in a truck, little panel truck, around to designated areas that were expecting me. I drew to the back door. I get out. There's a couple of bags of towels that are dirty. I'm to pick them up, put them in the back of the truck. There's probably 2 bags over here that are clean. Has the business name on them. Take them out, put them where the dirties are. Don't even talk to people. Sometimes they might. After 2 days on that job, I had to quit. And I remember going to the guy and I just said, man, it's so intense out there. And he says, you're doing good. We've had no complaints. And I'm like, man, but you don't know. I mean, the road, I mean, and the truck, and oh, that's how messed up I was, but I'm okay. Don't have any of this other mental thing. And again, if I believe that the definition of alcoholism meaning is that my life is fine as long as I don't drink, I'm missing the point. Again, we would have a 1-page book. It would be like any other allergy. Don't eat peanut butter. Unless you have an emotional attachment to peanut butter, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's not like you would need a 12-step meeting a week to avoid peanut butter. This is different. There's something different. And this is this mental, spiritual thing that goes on with guys like me. And I think I've been out of whack there way before I ever took the drink. Don't know if I was an alcoholic. I don't care. I've heard debates on both sides. But what I do know is that I've got this head up here with no volume knob, no off switch. And I don't believe it's friendly. I remember one of my sponsors at that point that was hanging with Jimmy, he said, Eric, don't spend too much time alone in your head. You're in dangerous territory. They would say up there, think, think, think. And they'd say, oh, no, that's not for you yet. Let us think. And I just have this deal. And the other deal is I have, which I equate to the physical sensation of where this spiritual malady lives, is I just got this hole in my heart somewhere in here. And on good days, unabated, that hole is maybe about the size of a tennis ball. I remember this old boy from Elk Point, the old pig farmer down there, he said on the good days, he said, then they drive by that old abandoned building on the way to the farm, and that ice cold wind would be blowing through that little hole, and we could handle that. All this inside of this is that feeling of apartness for me, that loneliness that tortures me, this just sense of impending doom, this sense of not being enough, this sense that it's not worth it, that somehow I'm defective. All that comes from this hole. And on the bad days, it's the size of a damn medicine ball. And it's hard to even get out of bed or get out of the house. I suffer from depression. I suffer from all these anxieties and phobias that just torture me. And I don't know about the rest of you. That didn't go away when I quit drinking. In fact, it amplified. And over a period of time, I started to think, sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous, that there was something more wrong with me. And I couldn't be wrong. It's just that I was operating under the idea, even sitting in AA, that alcohol, as long as I was not drinking, whatever's ailing me now is not alcoholism because I'm not drinking. And I don't want anybody to walk away, if you're new or whatever tonight, with that kind of belief. Because it can lead, and it did to me, in all kinds of different directions of what I'd need to solve that problem. When the answer for most of us are contained in a treasure map, or it wasn't so much a treasure map for me as what they told me is, Eric, you're in a minefield, it's best to get out of here with someone with a map. I don't know if it was so much for me trying to find heaven as it was to get out of the hellhole and the sinkhole that I was living in. And we do have a map out. I just had a misunderstanding of what ails me. The spiritual thing, if I really dig deeper and laying my last 30 years over this, and I hope this makes sense tonight, is all born, I think, out of this belief system that I carry around and have carried around most of my life to that point. And that belief system happened sometime when I was young. being the youngest of five, is where I came to understand and believe in one thing, and that it was all up to me. It was me against the world, that if I was going to make it, it had to be because I managed well. This idea that I can manage my own life, and in fact, I have to manage my own life if I'm going to get any happiness or satisfaction out of this world. This idea of self-sufficiency. I think that that is at the core of what spiritual malady ails alcoholics. And I don't even think it's just limited to us alkies. It's this idea, because out of that, at least for me, casts this formula that just almost cut me to ribbons. Is this idea that I can't trust people, I don't need help, I don't need God. I did not have formal religious. I know some people carry a lot of chains of having maybe a certain concept of God beating them over the head. I did not. I never quite honestly pondered, nor did I understand that I am not just physical, not just flesh, I'm not just a brain here, but I'm also a spiritual being. I had no concept of what that meant until you started sharing and people started sharing about what spiritual death feels like. And that's that hole. And that's that mind that just tends to torture me. And it all comes to this idea that something's wrong, this disconnected feeling. I remember Father Rock when I was working with him. He was probably the meanest priest I ever met in my life. I don't know why he picked me. I have no idea. But he used to talk about, this idea of God and this concept because, he said, "What, Eric, why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish with these steps?" I know today what we're trying to accomplish, but I didn't then. I remember telling him, I just would love to shoot for human. I just want to be a functioning human being. I want to quit living like an animal. I want to quit being my own worst enemy. All the unmanageability of my life. Mike talked about it last week. This step does not say that we're here because we mismanage things. It's that for me, it's completely unmanageable. I just can't figure it out. I believe it's because I operate on this concept or idea that self-sufficiency is what it is, where it's at. Another thing I've really been pondering in here on lately is that I hear this, and I even hear it on Sundays, and I can't line it up. Take this for whatever it's worth, but this idea that, we have free will. I can't find that. I can't find free will anywhere. It's not in this book. It's not in the other book I've been reading. Now, it does make a big case for self-will run riot. It makes a case for self-sufficiency, but certainly not free. This big book talks about when we come to this crossroads, once we realize, like I did, and maybe you, that I'm screwed. Drunk or sober, the full implication of step one is that I'm screwed. Is that I'm at this crossroads, and it really isn't a crossroads where I have choice. It is a crossroads where I have alternative. And it's much different. This crossroads, it talks about basically in page 25 of our book, where it talks about that we either choose the path or the alternative of spiritual help, or we're left with the default setting of alcoholic destruction. And I do believe that, quite honestly, I remember Father Rock telling me, he said, "Eric, there are no free agents in this deal. There is no free agents." He said, "We all serve a master." And I remember the work in step one is that, when I really did that work of all the things that I have served or worshiped, obviously alcohol was a higher power in my life. Obviously, all the narcotics I tried to utilize to try to control alcohol was a higher power in my life. There's been other times I put people in that place. There's been other times that I put money, material things in that place. And at other times, it's been myself. This idea of the intellect, the idea that I can outthink this problem, I can outthink a thinking problem with this head. I can't do it. I believe that this spiritual thing where I came to a crossroads as I hit a second bottom in Alcoholics Anonymous, sitting in meetings, sometimes 3 to 5 a day. Back in those days, it may be possible now. We had meetings at 8 a.m. I could go to a 10 a.m., sometimes a 1:30, a 5:30, and 8 o'clock in a candlelight meeting at night. It's what I did. And yet somehow, if I failed out of that process or went one night over to play music with guys, some nights maybe the hash pipe's going around as we're playing music and it's not a big deal. I'm in safe and secure. The next night as it passes, and I don't have any thought process with it. And as this smoke comes out, I'm going, oh my God, what did I just do? And then that thought is easily supplanted. Well, you already lost your chip. You might as well go for broke. Maybe some of you have felt this idea. And then I would go back to the 10 a.m. meeting at Southside, the next meeting, and do my mea culpa. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I did it again. I got to take out another 24-hour chip. And I did that for about the first 3 to 6 months in AA. And damn near killed me. And I got ground, again, with the head full of this understanding and working with people as they're trying to almost prophesize to me. This idea that not only am I bodily different, but my brain and my soul, I got a soul sickness here that's beyond anybody's help, that it's going to take a spiritual deal. And I don't know what made me so afraid to accept that, other than I thought I was giving something of value up. You know, I don't want to get too far ahead, but it all kind of ties together in this sense of coming to a sense of defeat or bottom, as we say here. But I have to agree what it says in the big book, that alcoholics, at least like me, have to get pretty badly mangled before we fully commence to understand our issues and do anything about it. And I was at the end of my ropes, and I will never forget, on that April 3rd, after going down to shoot freelance photography with some guys, and just happened to run into somebody that had some powder that I just couldn't resist, because I had no defense, as it says in the book, no effective mental defense. And I remember drinking a half-gallon of this crap moonshine, sitting up on that hill, never even took a damn picture. And I drove back in that deal, and I was at a level, I mean, I've been through physical torture, detoxing. The first time, you know, the third day of that, I had my first major heart attack. Almost died. If it wasn't for the medical people around me, I would have. But this was a different kind of a bottom. This was just a complete, or as Bill said, not only alcohol my master, it's just I'm screwed, drunk, or sober. I can't live like that anymore, and I can't live your way. I'm not capable. I must be that type of person, as the big book says, that's incapable of being honest with myself. And I remember that drive home from Yankton, which is what, 85 miles? Seemed like it took forever on a conveyor belt. And I remember getting into that house, and I'd moved in with my parents and reunited through the gift of this program and the hope that this thing had given them, that maybe for once their son was going to actually have a chance. And I snuck in that house so not to be detected, and I went down to that basement room, and I was just utterly defeated. I remember thinking about calling my sponsor, but at that point I didn't want to disappoint him one more time with me. And the thoughts of I should just take myself out is the best thing I could do, the most loving thing. I understand where those thoughts come from. And all this is welled up in me as I'm down in that little room. As I'm letting people down one more time, I just can't get this thing, man. I'm sitting in meetings, it just ain't soaking in. And I remember the the gift of the messages and the examples of the people that I watched that had this thing, and I knew it was real. I knew it was real. God, I knew they were authentic. God, I wanted that. Whatever it was in them. I wanted it more than life itself. And I was greatly attuned that it wasn't in me. And I remember it wasn't a prayer. I remember at times even playing around with this. Rock would tell me to get down on your knees, put your shoes under the bed. All these things to coax this arrogant, self-centered, narcissistic individual to get down on my knees and attempt a contact with this creator or higher power. This time there was none of that. I fell flat on my face as I laid prone. And I remember the simple thing that, I don't know if I uttered a prayer, I didn't know how to pray, I didn't even know if there was anything there. But I said, if there is a God, would you please help me? And I don't think it was until that point on April 1st that I had any idea of what it meant to have a complete surrender that step one requires. Where to my innermost self, I knew I was alcoholic. I knew that not only did I have a bodily difference to how I process alcohol, but I had a mind that would constantly work against me or present scenarios where I had no defense, even though I wanted to stay clean, or I could rationalize or convince that it was okay this time, that I had this spiritual malady inside that the longer I stayed sober, it was almost as if the nerves of my fingers just tend to come out. I got this sense of growing restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness that Silken talks about. I just can't hold it together. And I would go to a meeting, and for an hour it felt like things would subside. But then, if you only work a meeting program, the meeting's end. It's over. Now I got to leave that meeting. We can go hang out, and Mike knows this, that you go to the frying pans, or you can go and you can smoke cigarettes till 2, 3 in the morning. And it's just like the hangers-on at Monday night at the Pomp Room. It's a few people hanging around there that I'm going to try to stuff into this hole inside of me because I just can't figure this thing out, this thing called life. I can't do it. I have no doubt today that I am 100% hopeless apart from divine help. No longer, even though it doesn't stop me from new situations, to automatically going into default mode even after all these years and deciding that self-will in this deal is going to be the answer. But I have no doubt today that the most important thing that this program, you people, these steps, if we walk through and put my mind back together and taking that hole here and put something really kind of warm. It's hard to describe. I think the spiritual things that are real to me, I can't put words to them. That's what makes them so real. That hole's not there. Is that this program was designed for alcoholics and it fits me like a glove. If you're new, if you've been in AA, or even better yet, you've been around AA for a while thinking you've been in AA, finding it rough going, there's people that can actually help put your life back together, help you walk because they've walked the walk. The instructions in this book, the road map, the treasure map, whatever you call it and stuff, I have never in 31 years seen somebody apply this to their life and seen it fail. It says in the big book that rarely have we seen a person fail. I know that Bill, I've heard, again, I haven't talked to Bill, but that, he wanted to put never. I'm going to close with this. How subtle the insanity is of this illness. And it isn't just people that are new. You know, I've sponsored a lot of people over the years. It's one of the great gifts. My sponsor just passed here this past September. I'm in the process again of finding a new one. I'd had him a lot of years, but cancer took him out. Great man. Oh. But I've sponsored a lot of people, a lot of young people for whatever reason. Mike came in, we were young. We're not young anymore, Mike. Reed, you were young too. You know, a lot of young people. I've watched them grow up in this deal. Some of them, you know, had 10 years sobriety, and when they sobered up, they weren't even of legal age to drink. And I've had 3 cases of this, of how subtle this insanity can play when we're in AA that I've watched. And all 3 of them are so eerily similar that it just shakes me to the core. The first one was several years before and impacted the latter 2, several years between those. I remember the latter 2 that fell for this watched number 1 go through this deal. And we would sit with just utter dismay of how in the hell could he have done that? Knowing what we know now, with what's gifted us in these steps, what's in our life, look at what's in our world, how could, I would never do that. That's what I heard. But it goes something like this. You know, Eric, I've been thinking. Usually always starts there. I've been thinking. You know, not with anybody out loud. I've been thinking, you know, I sobered up pretty young. Hell, I wasn't even of legal age. You know, I'm really not sure I drank long enough to be an alcoholic. What I was thinking I was going to do is that I thought that I would try the experiment. Because there's 2 experiments in the book that test, and maybe I forgot them. The first one, if you're wondering if you have this allergy, it says try controlled drinking. Try it more than once. Have 2, stop abruptly. If you're not sure you have it, the mental obsession that goes with this, it says try leaving alcohol alone for a year. Good luck. It says most of us will be drunk within weeks, days, months. But he actually used the big book as his basis because we studied this book. It says in there, try to control drinking if I'm not convinced. And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And if it goes bad, because the worst that can happen is I'll just lose my chip. And really, even though that's got 10 years on it, you know, it really isn't about the years. It's all about today. I mean, he's really thought this through. It's a hell of a presentation. It's just minus a PowerPoint, you know. And he says, I can always just go back to the meetings and I'll pick up where I left off. And I'm listening to this, thinking of this young man when I met him, you know, as a hashish salesman, parents distraught, court system's got tentacles knee deep. That's now 10 years later, got a beautiful wife that's never seen him under the influence. Got a couple of beautiful kids that have never known what alcoholism active in the home can do. The reason I know that is I can see it in their eyes, full of life. They're safe, they're secure. And here's this bonehead sponsee of mine that wants to experiment. And I remember sitting there going, oh, how am I even trying to, that's why we need sponsorship, because I remember my sponsor looking at me kind of like this, still kind of does, it's kind of, I may be off a beam a bit. And I waited for him to be done. I said, are you done? You done? You sure? Is there anything more? And we were sitting outside by a fire, and I remember having this table there, and I said, very similar to this, I said, and I metaphorically went through, I said, before you leave with your beautiful idea here, I said, you're not leaving with my blessing. You're nuts. But you do what you want to do. I said, but why don't you take that beautiful wife of yours and those 2 kids and just leave them up on that table as a sacrifice? I said, because I don't know if you realize you're risking that. I said, and that beautiful job you got for $80,000 after we got you a pardon so that you could get bonded. Said you can just flush that down the toilet. Oh, I would never do that. I said, nah. I said, there's a couple of things that are facts really not in evidence here. I said, number one, everybody I've ever seen after a period of sobriety that goes back, they have a hell of a time trying to maintain continuous sobriety on subsequent attempts to come back. That's been true. Been a few, very few. And I said, you're assuming that it's going to be the same. I'll never forget when he walked away with just this sense of loss. My God, how can we get so wrapped up in 10 years in AA to where we can get to the point to where we could fall for that kind of subtle, well, for lack of a better term, just bold-faced lie and deception. He drank. I'll never forget. It went well for about a week. 20 years later, just saw this individual on multiple felonies. Now he's up on the deal. He has completely lost his family, the job. He's unemployable. Absolutely, completely 100% out of control, weighs about 100 pounds. And you know, when I meet with him now, all he can talk about, do you remember? You remember how good it was? You remember those? Do you remember? I can always tell when people are in trouble in this program is that all they can talk about is the old days. It's kind of like at the bar. Geez, Mike, I hadn't seen Mike for 10 years since high school. We got to relive the good old days as we sit on the bar because we don't want to talk about today. Because today is another matter. And I'm not talking about what's really going on today. What's interesting is 2 people that witnessed that. The last one just tumbled here, with the same kind of idea. And I remember, it's almost the same story. It's kind of like a Groundhog Day. And I remember, do you remember watching? Oh, yeah. But I'm not like him. This is a powerful thing we're up against here. Big Book says, therefore, the main problem of an alcoholic is really in our mind. That's, you know, it's one thing to avoid alcohol. It's another thing as step 2 is work this step to the point to where we can be restored to some sense of sanity. I have to be ever vigilant, always active, always willing to learn. I pray that I never forget. I thank God for everything that He has granted in my life. I think of my wife and our 2 beautiful boys. Oh my God. If you would have told me that not only through this process that I could find a volume knob or an off switch for this head, that I could find a way to seal this up, even just a little, so I could suck it up through the day. If you could just give me one guarantee that I could walk by a drink and not feel like at every moment, if I let my guard down, I'm diving in with both feet, even though I don't want to. If you would have given me that, I would have traded it all just for that. That would have been enough. I would have given it, I'd given my life for that. To shut this head off. Peace. What I've always been looking for all my life and didn't know it. Peace. Some sense of purpose and belonging in my own skin. The ability to match my words with my actions. But what God has seen through this program and through the gift of these steps and this complete surrender that comes from absolute nuclear bottom. I mean, I blew everything up. There's nothing left at 27 years old. I have been given, I love that story in the back. In exchange for that, I've been given the keys to the kingdom. I woke up this morning. My wife likes to sleep. She's more of the evening person. I've become a morning person. I used to just be a vampire, but now I'm a morning person. I love it. Phone ain't ringing. Ain't nobody asking me nothing. Fires at work are still smoldering, but they ain't flaming. But my youngest gets up with me. Gets up about the same time. And he's now 8. Little Devin, he's a lot like his dad. He's wired. He's rambunctious. He's never seen a rule he didn't want to test or a boundary he didn't want to step over. I don't know if you can relate to that. That was how I'm wired. But in the morning, he's probably at his mellowest, and he loves to snuggle with Dad. Sometimes we don't even say words. As I sit with that little man, and I look into his eyes, and he says stuff to me like, I love you, Daddy. I love you, son. I watch my wife get up, my other son drag out, you know. Those 15 minutes of my chaotic morning are enough. The rest of the day is just gravy. There's so much more than water wagon sobriety in these rooms. There is so much more than settling for average or for settling for something less than the fullness of what this book offers. It goes beyond anything that my brain at times today, after 31 years, can wrap around, let alone in the beginning. But this idea that not only can I have a fatal illness, a deadly illness, more deadly than most forms of cancer, which I've buried a lot of friends, and I stand here in arrestment tonight. That I don't have to go down with that ship. It is a medical miracle. Alcoholics Anonymous is. Prior to 1935, guys like me, honestly, you would have a different speaker. We'd be at a different meeting. I wouldn't have made it. And what I've been given is the most beautiful life. I don't know about the rest of you, and I'm going to shut the hell up. I had dreams as a kid. I don't know if I thought of them in dreams, but I had ideas that life meant something, was going somewhere, and I was going to be a part of it. Somewhere through a series of mishaps, things out of my control, and then at some point when my ego kicked in, my own decisions led me through a series of things to where everything was stripped from me in terms of not only externally, but for most intended purposes on the inside. Left hopeless. No ideas of dreams of things changing because the evidence was overwhelming to me. All these things that I just knew would never happen. Never happen. Couldn't happen. Even if it did, I was incapable of capitalizing on it. And I knew it. For the idea that a guy like me at 27 can come in and admit complete defeat, stumble within Alcoholics Anonymous, and people never gave up on me. The point that where I could get to a point to be introduced to this God I did not come here looking for, absolutely didn't understand, had nothing but failure to offer him, and he took me anyway. And then he has led me not only to the people, but the people have led me to him. And each one of these steps just tends to build on the other to where he is placed together to the point to where today, through God, all things are possible in my life. How does that happen? On such a consistent, regular basis apart from Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sure it does out there. I just don't see it with the regularity. If I have one message for people here today is that whether you believe it or not, there's a God who created you that loves you more than life itself, that wants to be in your stuff, wants to be in your mess, wants to be in your powerlessness, wants to be in your insanity, wants to be in your misconceptions, wants to be in it all. Because he wants to give the very same things that's been granted to guys like me. Peace, direction, the ability to go out and drag another soul off that line, whatever that is. I am just so grateful and honored that Mike, that you would, and the committee, or whoever it was, that would even consider asking me to be here this evening. It is an honor to share my failure with you. You know, I've often told them, you know, there's more luscious steps out there where I could get spiritually, you know, I could share some spiritual proliferance. Maybe that's why they didn't. You know, step one, living in the problem, is the son of a gun. Good news is that starting here next week, we can begin to work on, you know, where do we go from here? I love you all. Online folks, if some of you are out there that I think you are, I hope to see you soon, face to face. So, Mike, if there's anything else, I think that's.
Thank you, Erik.
Thank you.
Let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and the glory, forever and ever.